Okay, let's see. Let's see. Let's see what we've got going. All right, we're live on YouTube. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let everyone in.
Yep, please let people in. And hello, my name's Chuck Fall. I'm with Truth Action Project. Oops, so I'm going to start again. We're going to let people in, and then we will formally start. Okay, we have our good. Okay. Hello, my name's Chuck Fall. I'm with Truth Action Project. We are a community of activists engaged in truth work, of partners who believe, as we do, that it's very important to speak truth to power and essentially demand accountability and justice for what amounts to state crimes and other cover-ups. Today, we're meeting, our guest is Bryce Lockwood. He is a gunnery sergeant and was on the USS Liberty in 1965, and it was attacked by Israel, and that attack was covered up by the United States government. And that's what we're going to be exploring and discussing today. The USS Liberty is the cover-up that very few people know about. And it's a point of deep consternation to many people in the truth movement, because it's such a terrible event. So I'll make a quick disclaimer here that the positions and viewpoints presented at this TAP forum are not the position of TAP. They are the position and opinions of those who present them. We encourage our guests and participants to like and share on your social media, on our social media, the work that TAP is doing. We have a great Rumble channel. You can like and share those. Like and share this event right now with Bryce Lockwood. So, Bryce, I'm going to take the spotlight off of myself, and we're just going to go straight into it. And I'm going to let you give us an introduction. I mean, I introduced you as a gunnery sergeant. You were present on the USS Liberty. You can talk about what your job was. So let's just back up. What is the USS Liberty? What happened and why is it an important thing, a bit of history for Americans to appreciate and know something about?
The USS Liberty was the world's premier spy ship back in 1960. 65 was when she was actually reconfigured, brought up to date with electronic gear and so forth. She'd been a converted World War II Victory class freighter. She was pretty much perfect for the type of work that the government needed. Several sub-Saharan African countries had just won their independence in the early 1960s, and there was a large Soviet influence and Cuban influence among the newly found freedom countries. Sub-Saharan Africa is very rich in natural resources, and Uncle Sam wanted to keep track of what was going on there, especially the Cuban influence and Soviet influence. She cruised up and down the west coast of Africa. Among her capabilities, she had the world's foremost mobile computer. It was a UNIVAC 500 computer that was the world's most powerful mobile computer at the time. You could probably do just about as much work now with your cell phone as we could back then with that UNIVAC computer. We also had a moon bounce system called TRESCOM, a huge dish antenna mounted at the back of the ship to bounce signals off from the moon into Cheltenham, Maryland. Mind you, at that time, satellites were very rudimentary. This was the most up-to-date process that we had for getting raw intelligence material directly to our consumers at National Security Agency in Washington. In June of 1967, it was pretty obvious that hostilities were coming to the forefront between Israel and what was then the United Arab Republic, which at the time consisted primarily of Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and to some lesser extent, the country of Libya. Uncle Sam wanted to keep track of what was going on. She dispatched the USS Liberty to leave her cruising up and down the west coast of Africa, proceed with all due haste to port of Rota, Spain, where they would take on stores and refueling, some additional linguists, and head with all due speed to the Eastern Mediterranean, where hostilities were imminent.
So let me interrupt you. So Bryce, there's some feedback sound going on here. You are a linguist yourself, correct?
Yes.
And you're trained in Russian.
Russian, that's correct.
You joined the Marines in 1959. And so we're talking I got my date, we're talking 1967?
Yes, that's correct. June 8th, 1967.
June 8th, 1967. And the USS Liberty gets an order to go to the north coast, off the coast of essentially Egypt. Is that? And
that's correct.
And listen in. So you're describing essentially a spy ship, right?
That's correct. That was all considered very secret back in those days.
Right.
But anyone with a lick of common sense could just take a look at her and see all the antennas. Basically, every frequency that you could transmit a signal on, USS Liberty had the capability of catching.
So tell us about, so you've been, the USS Liberty was sent to in effect observe what's called the 5-day war. This is
6-day war.
The 6-day war, and Israel is fighting Egyptians, Jordanians, and Syrians.
That's correct.
Yes, that's right, because the Jordanians did not participate in the Yom Kippur War in 72, but this case it's 3 nations. Okay, so keep telling the story. So you're on the ship. You have a job to do, and your job is to listen in on. We'll talk about your job.
There were 6 of us linguists that joined the ship at Port of Rota, Spain. There were 3 of us Marines and 3 civilians from the National Security Agency. I was the only Russian linguist in the group. All the rest of them were all Arabic linguists. We were en route to the Eastern Mediterranean. I think the date was June the 4th when our senior research officer
on a boat that's for the Navy.
Our senior research officer called us supervisors of the linguistic department together and told us what we were going to be doing. Our primary targets, there was a Soviet Tu-95 task force, 6 Soviet Tu-95, 5 Soviet Tu-95s stationed at Alexandria, Egypt. And the Soviet Union had told the rest of the world that they were given to the United Arab Republic, primarily Egypt. But such was pretty far from the truth. They were all Soviet troops, Soviet crews. They would wear United Arab Republic uniforms. While they were on the ground, they'd get airborne, fly over the US 6th Fleet, primarily in the Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean. As soon as they got in international waters, they'd change frequencies and go to plain language Russian. That was primarily our target, was those 5 Soviet Tu-95s to make sure the Russians stayed out of the fray. Our orders were that we were to pick up anything that we could in voice communications. We would identify them. In particular, we were told not to copy anything that was Israeli. If we picked up a signal and identified it as Hebrew coming from Israel, we were to make a notation of it and drop it. Our primary targets were the Soviet Union, Egypt, Libya, Jordan, and Syria. That's pretty much it.
Okay. So the USS Liberty has a job. It's listening in, and let's then talk about, obviously, Israel did not want the USS Liberty ship listening. Is that a fair characterization? I mean, there's a lot going on here. Why don't you go ahead and unpack that? Why the attack?
I suppose you could assume that, but the bottom line is Israel had plans to attack Golan Heights on June the 8th, 1967. And here comes this USS spy ship, kind of got in the way of their plans. Israel had captured an entire Egyptian brigade, I think on the 5th of June. Basically, they were hungry and starving and had pretty much just surrendered to the Israelis. The Israelis claimed that they were being shelled from the sea at a town that they'd occupied called El Arish. Actually, what was happening there is they captured a bunch of Egyptian ammunition and was blowing that up, and they were kind of using the excuse as for attacking our ship. Later years, we came to think that in all probability, we were set up by our own government as a sacrificial lamb to get the U.S. involved in the 6 Days War. Why do I say that? On the morning of June the 8th, our entire U.S. nuclear force was on full alert. There were B-52s at Air Force Base in Marysville, California, sitting at the end of the runway, armed with nuclear weapons, their engines idling, waiting to be dispatched. The U.S. 6th Fleet was also in nuclear readiness. After we were attacked many years later, we found out from Captain Joe Tully, who was a skipper of the USS Saratoga. He had dispatched aircraft to come to our aid, and Defense Secretary Robert McNamara ordered them returned. Captain Tully figured that was probably because some of those planes had nuclear weapons aboard them. So he ordered them recovered, ordered other aircraft with conventional weapons launched to come to our aid. Again, Secretary McNamara came on the radio, ordered them returned. The commander of Task Force 6, his admiral was Admiral Larry Geis. Admiral Geis said, I want to hear that from higher authority. Well, the only higher authority than the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, was the president. The president came on the air and said, get those aircraft back. I will not have my allies embarrassed. Now, the question is, how did President Johnson know his allies were attacking us? The Israelis were using unmarked aircraft, which is a violation of international law. We did not know who was attacking us. How did President Johnson know? There were several violations of international law in the attack. Number one, our flag was flying. The Israelis shot down that one. It was raised again, shot that one down. The second time they shot it down, flag staff was destroyed. Our signalman, fellow by the name of Joe Metters, while he's under fire from a signal halyard, not the flag staff, but from a signal halyard, ran up our holiday flag. That's the largest flag you have aboard ship, 5 feet by 8 feet. The ship was clearly marked GTR 5. GTR stands for General Technical Research. That makes her a non-combatant. The Israelis were Machine gunning our life rafts that we put overboard, that's a violation of international law. They were jamming our distress frequencies, which is also a violation of international law. The irony of that is that agreement came about after World War II as a result of Nazi submariners, wolf packs, machine gunning life rafts of refugees. And many of them were Israelis. Admiral Geis, some of us were evacuated to the carrier USS America. I had been talking to Commander Lewis when the torpedo struck. I was facing the torpedo. I got flash burns from it. My face was coal black the next day. I had 2 white circles where my glasses were that protected my face. Commander Lewis had been perpendicular to the torpedo explosion. Debris from the torpedo sealed his eyes shut. He was medevac by helicopter the next day, as was I. And Commander Lewis was racked with first aid tape from the head to his foot. He was raised by a winch aboard the helicopter in a litter basket, placed in the helicopter and strapped down. With all of that bandaging on him, the attendant on the aircraft couldn't tell which end was which and sat on his head. Commander Lewis said it was pretty ironic to me that he said, here I have survived a torpedo attack and I may have to die from suffocation because some guy's sitting on my head. Days later, aboard the America, Admiral Geis, after Mr. Lewis recovered his eyesight, his eyes were lanced open by one of the medical personnel. Admiral Geis called him to his stateroom, swore him to secrecy until after he was perished, and told him the story that the Sixth Fleet had attempted 2 occasions to send rescue aircraft to us and drive off our attackers. And the president had come on with that statement, get those aircraft back. I will not have my allies embarrassed.
Hey, let me interrupt. Oh, we have some feedback. What was the purpose of having nuclear bombs on airplanes ready to go? Who were those bombs theoretically going to be dropped on?
We believe Egypt.
Okay, so go ahead. Unpack that a little bit.
Lyndon Johnson hated the Egyptians, and especially Gamal Abdel Nasser, who at the time was the commander of president of Egypt. He absolutely despised President Nasser. And Lyndon Johnson had a long empathy towards the nation of Israel. Going back to 1946, 47, 48, when Israel so-called won their independence, land stolen from the Palestinians, the Johnson Ranch in Johnson City, Texas, was shipping large containers labeled Texas grapefruit to Israel. It was not Texas grapefruit.
It was weapons.
Weapons of war being supplied.
That was before, and that was before 1948, 1946, you said?
1947, yes.
47. Okay, so President Johnson, he's kind of the real kind of power behind this, because so basically you're saying the theory that you're working on here is that the USS Liberty was a pawn. The United States, some deep state operatives had an agreement with Israel that they would sink it, and then they would point the finger at Nasser, at the Egyptians for doing that. Is that correct?
That's correct. The there's a professor of history at Temple University named Joan Mellon came out with a book some years ago titled Faustian Bargains. In that book, she documents exactly how Lyndon Johnson came to power, pretty much what happened to the USS Liberty in 1967, and revolves around Lyndon Johnson's love for the Israeli people and his spite towards the Egyptians. In that book, she documents how the number 2 man in the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency at the time, a man by the name of James Eagleton. James Eagleton was not just the number 2 man in U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. He was also a double agent with the Israeli Mossad. And he was the one that planned to send the USS Liberty to her doom off the coast of Sinai. The idea was to sink the ship, kill every man aboard it, blame it on the Egyptians. Thankfully, the Israelis fired 5 torpedoes at us from a classic wedge formation torpedo boat attack. Only one struck the ship. That's the one that struck just ahead of the midships. There was a large steel beam that was part of the main superstructure of the ship. That torpedo struck right on the edge of that steel beam. If it had struck anywhere else, 8 inches to the left, 8 inches to the right, it would have ripped her in half. As it was, the vast majority of the explosion was on the hull of the ship.
So this is the false flag. False flag is comes from pirates putting up the flag of the ship they're going to attack, so that the ship relaxes and doesn't get ready for a fight, and then they get taken. Is the meaning of false flag? This one you're saying was intended to get the United States into the war against Egypt in order to defeat Egypt, or was there a bigger plan of conquest than just beating the Egyptians? Because the Israelis evidently beat the Egyptians without the Americans. They didn't really need the Americans, did they?
Probably not, but Lyndon Johnson wanted to be in on the firefight, as I mentioned about his spite for President Nasser and the Egyptian people in general. Let's go back to the capture of the Egyptian brigade. The plan was to attack Golan Heights on June the 8th and seize it for Israel. Israel was short on troops, and here they had a huge number of their troops guarding the Egyptians that had been captured. It seems that after Sinai was captured some years later, found mass graves with those Egyptian prisoners of war. They were forced to dig their own graves. Then many of them were found machine gunned with their hands tied behind their backs with barbed wire. And there was a purpose for that. It was to use those troops in the attack on Golan Heights. After the USS Liberty was disabled, the Israelis attacked Golan Heights and took it pretty much with ease. About 6 years ago, I was giving a lecture on this in Olathe, Kansas, at a church, and I'm reiterating what had happened. And I had told that there was some speculation about the fact that the Israelis had paid off the Syrian commander on Golan Heights to pull his troops back. There was a gentleman there by the name of Fadi Banjamarja, a Syrian immigrant. Fadi raised his hand up and waved back and forth and said, "What you say is true. My uncle was a lieutenant colonel in the Syrian army, and what you say is true."
So the USS Liberty is the fog of war. I mean, the fog of war is the term for all the confusion, obfuscation, plausible deniability, um,
An excuse for friendly fire.
an excuse for friendly fire. Okay, I get it. I mean, I haven't, and I think we're going to be posting into the chat, Trina, some of those some interesting links that have background. We've before our meeting tonight, we discussed Allison Weir has a couple of interesting posts that if only Americans knew. Allison was on our show, our TAP forum month prior, and we were discussing Israel and Gaza. So
Allison is an amazing woman and a very brave lady for what she's doing.
absolutely. So this is so let's stay in the 1960s. I mean, and we can kind of we do need to kind of connect the past with today. So let's just cut to the chase. The point is you're working for some accountability and some justice. Is that right? Is that kind of what you've dedicated much of your own personal time to doing around the issue of the USS Liberty?
Article 1, Section 8, U.S. Constitution requires U.S. Congress to investigate acts of piracy on the high seas and acts against the laws of nation. Here's an attack on a U.S. ship on open seas, clearly marked. No, she had no offensive capability at all whatsoever. And our U.S. Congress has done nothing about it. There was pretty much a sham court of inquiry conducted by Admiral Kidd, Isaac Kidd. It only lasted for 5 days, and they were ordered to conclude that they were to accept Israel's case of mistaken identity. Flash forward a few years, and there was a U.S. ship attacked in the port of Yemen, the USS Darrell Cole. There were 17 sailors killed aboard that. Our U.S. Congress spent 9 months investigating the Cole attack.
Mm.
There were twice as many killed aboard the USS Liberty. And the investigation lasted less than a week.
That was a slam dunk cover up.
I would say so, yes. The Israelis made their excuses. Oh, we couldn't see the flag because there was smoke, or there wasn't any smoke until they dropped napalm on us. They didn't know it was an American ship. They mistook it for El Qasir, which is a World War I Egyptian horse carrier, which had not been to sea for 20 years and was waiting to be cut up for scrap. Now, your audience should probably know here, you do not fire on any ship at sea without having clear identification. The standard reference is Jane's All the World's Fighting Ships. And USS Liberty was clearly identified in there with all the information about her, when she was manufactured, what she looked like, number of crewmen aboard her. All of that was available to the Israelis before the attack. And, excuse me, but the El Qasir was a third the size of the USS Liberty. I suppose you could say the Israeli pilots were colorblind. American ships are painted gray with highlighted markings, that GTR 5 that identifies a ship for whom she is. They're highlighted in white with a outline in black against that gray material. Egyptian ships on the opposite side were painted black with the hull markings in Arabic script. Every road sign in Israel has 3 languages: Hebrew, English, and Arabic. So you can't tell me that they could not tell Arabic script from English.
And furthermore, you just represented that the 3 flags were floated, were pulled up. The the celebratory flag, the biggest one was after the staff was broken, it was flying, and of course the Israelis. So those are all I qualify as pathetic, lame answers to what happened. Why'd you do it? What and so on. We're not going to get anywhere if truth is our mission, and here we are at Truth Action Project. We do value truth and transparency. We value protection for whistleblowers. So you're a casualty. You are a survivor of a false flag. Let's go to the accountability piece. What?
Chuck, real quick.
Yes.
May I? We have
Absolutely, Trina, go.
We have a couple of questions. I don't know if Bryce wants to answer those now, or do you
Well,
want to hold them until
let's
the end?
go into the chat, Trina, and read the questions. And Bryce,
Well,
you're going to get a couple chat questions.
Well, this
Okay.
one from Eugene Stan. Have you learned why the Israelis didn't quote unquote finish off Liberty?
They ran out of ammunition, bottom line. They had no
Okay.
more torpedoes to fire.
Okay. All right. All right. And then another one, how many other ships at the time had that much surveillance equipment on board? And that's the question of Stone Hobbit.
To the best of my knowledge, there was none anywhere in the area. Now, there were roughly the Israeli class, there were 5 of those ships: Jamestown, Georgetown. USS Liberty was the newest of them all. But they had other areas of operation to keep track of, like the Soviets and the Chinese and the Koreans. So we were the only one that was available for this operation.
Okay. And then this is more of a comment, but I'll let you go ahead and address it however you'd like. This is from Claudio Marti. Egypt had no nuclear weapons. It doesn't make sense that the USA would nuke a non-nuke nation. Had to be a country that had nukes to be the target of nuking.
Unless it's a false flag operation.
Thank you for responding. That's it for now, Chuck, on the questions.
Well, thanks, Trina, for fielding those. And well, I want let's stay with the being in 1967. Tell us a little bit about, you were medevaced off of the ship by helicopter, so you weren't present when the ship limped into Malta and took harbor there. Is that tell us a bit about the after effects of this and the aftermath? And
yeah, I'd like to touch base on that. The first friendly faces that we saw were the next morning, June the 9th. A friend of mine that I had met when I first joined the ship, Lowell Bingham, had a nickname of Buzz. He said to me, "Sarge, let's go topside and see what's happening up there." We stepped out on the deck, and you could not believe the destruction. Everything, just the whole front part of the ship, forecastle part of the ship, was red with blood. There were 2 machine gun tubs on the front of the forecastle, one on either side. There were 2 machine gunners in each of those machine guns nests, and there was a shield that went around them to keep them from slipping overboard during heavy seas. Rockets from the Israeli planes struck that shield, and then the men that were in those machine gun tubs. And there was blood everywhere. I remember stepping out there on the deck and looking up, and there was Old Glory flying. Every time I hear the Star Spangled Banner, that phrase, the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night our flag was still there. There was a photograph taken from USS America the following morning. The ship almost totally destroyed, but still afloat. A helicopter hovering over the front part of the ship, hauling up survivors, and you can clearly see the American flag fly.
So I get the false flag of the USS Liberty. It's, we don't know. I mean, you were there surveilling the Russian voices, transmissions. Your authorities told you not to pay any attention to Hebrew transmissions, which was effectively giving the Israelis a pass for whatever they were saying. Pardon?
A green light.
Giving them a green light. The Israeli imperative to take Golan Heights. I mean, we're trying to sort through fog of war stuff, but clearly sinking the USS Liberty, these things have multiple values. One, sinking the USS Liberty enables the Israelis to get rid of an entity that's surveilling it. So, if you're waging, who the hell wants you to be? No one likes spying on you when you're doing what you want to do. So you're a nuisance on that front. But then, of course, sinking the USS Liberty would demand an explanation, and the logical one is to stick it onto the Egyptians. This is make the Egyptians essentially a kind of patsy, if you will, in this event. So, and then you've explained that President Johnson has this weird a relationship with Israel, and I know there's a whole theory of JFK's assassination that ties it into Israelis, but we're not going to unpack that one or try to unpack that. But let's go.
Chuck, I probably should mention here the aftermath. There were two destroyers that came up on us the next morning, USS Davis and USS Massey, and we needed help desperately. We needed blood, we needed plasma, we needed damage control people. And what a beautiful sight that was when I saw those two ships there the next morning and aid coming to us. Now here's another sticker. There were facilities on the island of Crete where some of you Bible scholars out there might recall the Apostle Paul suffered shipwreck. The island of Crete was closer, 2 days sailing closer at the maximum speed Liberty could make than the port which she was sent to, which was Lucca, Malta. And the idea was she is so badly damaged, she's going to sink at sea, and the evidence will be in Davy Jones's locker.
Oh boy.
30 years later, we had a reunion in Washington, D.C., and our chief engineer aboard it, George Golden, he was a Mustanger from destroyers in World War II. George Golden was talking to me, and he said, Bryce, that bulkhead was going like this. Well, you know what happens to steel when it's flexed? They were hoping she'd go down and the evidence destroyed. Well, Admiral Bill Martin, yep. when she was at Malta, there was some talk about that. She was just worthless. Damage was just so heavily, her keel was twisted. Admiral Martin says, we're not going to give those, I will use a nice term here. He used a slang. We're not going to give those motherless children the satisfaction of putting her down. We're going to patch her up, paint her up, and send her home.
Is that what happened?
Yes.
What became of the USS Liberty?
She was useless when she was home ported back in Norfolk. She sat there for, I think, 2 years and then was sold for scrap. 6 figures, low 6 figures for scrap.
So for 2 days, those destroyers could have been pulling soldiers onto the ship and feeding them blood and making them well. They could have taken the ship to Crete and immediately attended to whatever needed to be attended to, but that wasn't what happened. They
Well,
delayed.
damage control people from the Massey and the Davis got her going again, got her power up and got her going again, but she could only make a maximum 6 knots. But like I say, she proceeded under her own power to the island of Malta. But the idea was to let her sink at sea. 2 extra days, that much tougher on what little bit there was left of her.
So what should Americans think about this scandal?
They should demand a congressional investigation. We're dying off.
Well,
I'm 84 years old. I ain't gonna live forever.
What's up with Congress then? Why isn't, you pointed out that the Constitution empowers Congress to hold tribunals, investigate these things. What's up with Congress that it hasn't done what you suggested it should do?
Well, excuse me, but in my opinion, what do you expect from the U.S. Congress? For years, I've said the only way we're going to get anything done is for one of us survivors to run for Congress and get elected and order an investigation ourselves. In fact, I ran for U.S. Congress, Missouri's 7th Congressional District 2 years ago. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, I got whooped by a lady in the primary and never made it to the general election.
Well, good job. That's a whole nother topic, TAP, we're 501c3. We can't endorse individual candidates. However, we can educate around the function and purpose of Congress, the function and purpose of elected officials, the function and purpose of taking an oath of office and the Constitution. Because what you're describing, I personally haven't gotten as deep into it as I am with you right now with USS Liberty. I've had debates with people about what's the worst crime? JFK's assassination, 9/11, blah, 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 USS Liberty. And they insist, well, USS Liberty is way up there in terms of a grievance that should be demanded accountability for.
Jeff, let me give you an example here, Congress. In 2009, U.S. Congressman Roy Blunt was running for the U.S. Senate. Roy Blunt is from right here in Stratford, Missouri. His farm is just, well, I can't throw a baseball that far, but it's just the other side of the interstate from where I am right now. We were invited to address Stratford High School on Veterans Day in 2009. I spoke on the attack on the USS Liberty. Very briefly, mentioned what I pretty much went through here. There were 826 strikes of heavy armament, heavy ammunition on USS Liberty, which includes the one torpedo that struck her. There were 3,100 strikes of heavy caliber machine gun shells aboard her. And U.S. Congress has never done anything about it, never conducted an investigation, which is required by Article 1, Section 8 U.S. Constitution. And I sat down. Then Congressman Roy Blunt was the next speaker. He got up and he said, Bryce, and everyone here, we need to remember that Israel is our best ally. And if Iran continues her pursuit of acquiring nuclear weapons, we're going to need Israel's help.
So pragmatism says we have to cover this up because we need to secure the protection of the nation from wicked boogeymen like the mullahs in Iran.
Here's some more irony about the whole thing. Israel realized when they got away with it in 1967, they could do whatever they wanted and receive no interference from the US government. The attack on Gaza is a result of that. Oh, sure, there's an excuse of 1,200 people killed. But excuse me, that's questionable because there were Israeli helicopters that were sent over to that meeting, music.
The music rave event.
Yes. And they couldn't tell whether they were, they couldn't tell whether they were Israelis or whether they were Palestinians that were there. And many of those Israeli casualties were from their own troops, from their own helicopters. And just very recently, on June 8th of this year, exactly 57 years after the attack on USS Liberty, the Israelis used a false flag operation to rescue, what was it, 4 of their prisoners that were taken captive by Hamas. And in the process, they destroyed how many? Gaza lives. And most of them are women, children.
You know what's coming up for me right now, Bryce, as I'm listening to you is I read a book titled Reverence. It's a thin book, and a philosopher out of college in Texas wrote it. And there's a point where he talks about the Athenians during the Peloponnesian War. They killed all the men and women, or they killed all the men and took all the women of an island that was in alliance with Sparta. And they went, it was an example of not reverential, that even within war, there should be some semblance of respect. And there's things you just don't do. You know what I'm saying? Decency. And what this author in this book, Reverence, talked about was that these are the Athenian people. They glorified in their democracy. They, were much better than the Spartans, who were, an authoritarian military society. And yet, because this island wouldn't pay tribute, in effect, to Athens, the Navy went in and they just basically wiped them all out. So we are in a place in our society today, and the Gaza event, the complete annihilation of Gaza, and we talked about this last forum, is off the charts insanity. But what you're pointing out was there's this problem of when someone is not held accountable and they get away with it, then the impunity sets in. And what we're in effect witnessing is a form of impunity. And I think as a truth activist, and that our job is to do what you're doing, which is to fight the fight, and that is to demand accountability. So part of our problem is that our own Congress, and I'll close with this, our own Congress is complicit. Eisenhower, oddly, after 8 years of advancing national security state, gives our nation a warning. He says, "Hey, the military-industrial complex is a problem." And he also, in his speech, talked about the biopharmacological industry as the military expanding into that realm. He wanted to add military-industrial congressional complex. But his advisor said, no, that won't go over well. We're not going to slur the Congress on this one. So Eisenhower, at the end of his term, has an odd kind of lament and a reflection and a warning to the nation. That warning remains as apt and relevant today as it was, probably even more today, because we are witnessing in Israel and what they're doing in Gaza, and we could even connect the Ukraine war and all these other wars that the 9/11 event introduced, quote, forever wars. We were told, now that 9/11 has happened, we must anticipate forever wars. We must be prepared and we must fight. So we're not going to talk about 9/11, but I'm just going to observe this is our crises. We are in crises, and I accept that the fighting for justice and truth and accountability for USS Liberty is good and appropriate and right. And it's something that opens us to understanding that our government does do atrocious things. And I think that's kind of the rub here, is a lot of Americans just don't think their government would ever do that to them. Trina has her hand up.
Thank you, Chuck. And thank you, Bryce. And as you mentioned, Ellison Weir was very brave and courageous, and I want to say that you are as well. So thank you. And my question is, earlier you had mentioned Congress, you wanted a new investigation to run through Congress, and I wanted to let our audience and all of our viewers out there on the internet, let them know that you are running for Missouri State Representative. And I'm going to drop the link to your website in the chat for everyone. My question to you is, do you have plans when you, if you are elected to the Missouri State Representative seat, how will you be able to try to bring forward an investigation on the USS Liberty? Thank you.
I think it'll be very difficult, but what we can do is make sure our children get a good education, support for public schools, make sure that our people have good quality medical care available. State of Missouri turned down huge sum of money from the federal government for Medicaid a couple of years ago. If we had that money now, there would be hospital and clinic facilities for almost every Missourian available. Our highways are a terrible mess here in Missouri, entirely inadequate, ruts everywhere, bumps everywhere. Just a couple of years ago, the federal government National Highway Traffic Safety Administration earmarked $350 million to the state of Missouri for road and bridge improvements. But our marvelous state legislature, heavily controlled by Republicans, passed a little law allowing open containers in the front seat of an automobile. Open containers of what? Alcohol. Well, what happens when you mix alcohol with driving? You have accidents, you have people injured, you have people killed. And as a result of passing that allowance, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration said you won't get your money until that's overturned. And our highways are a terrible mess right now. Why was that passed? Well, if you go to Jefferson City, Missouri, the closest building to the state capitol is an office building. The office on the corner of that building is a Convenience Store of America headquarters. And guess who has the most influence?
Israel?
Probably the one that has the office the closest.
So what do you think we can do in our, is there anything that you think we can do through the channels of government to bring forward the USS Liberty investigation?
Pressure. I don't know how well it's going to work, but we need to break the bonds that Israel has over our federal government. This is just my personal opinion, but take a look sometime at how many members of our U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate have dual citizenship.
Right.
How many? I don't know. Do you have a hard number for that?
I do not, but
okay.
Look it up sometime. You'll be unpleasantly surprised.
I'll Google that, Chuck. I'll see if I can find any.
That was actually in another, I participated in a group called Green Renaissance, and that question was raised, and the dual citizenship. Yeah, Israel has the Israeli, the AIPAC lobbying group, very powerful, very influential. I saw an interview with Tucker Carlson. A House of Representative Congressman Matthias from Kentucky. Very interesting guy, very libertarian. He lives off grid in the eastern section of the state, and really reasonable musician, lovely man. And but he doesn't take any. He absolutely refused to take any money from the Israeli lobby, and represented as a very much a free agent, a kind of an ideal congressperson. And I think so. The problem is, if you take money, whoever you take money from, you're going to feel sympathetic to them, because after all, they helped you out and you feel some obligation. I mean, this is a call for campaign finance reform, essentially nationalizing.
You might check with Justice Thomas about that.
Right. No, our country is oddly, I'm not gonna say we're divided. There's just some ideas that are sunk deep that need, and this is why the work that we do at TAP, and I think the truth community work is 99% educational, because that's all we have is our thoughts and our ideas and what we can write down and what we can communicate to persuade people. So to some extent, I get the criticism that Israel has capture over the United States government. And I don't think there's any debate about that. And the fact that Israel is conducting, this Gaza event is off the charts, cruel. And the young people today understand that cruelty, and they recognize the cruelty. They may not understand ideologies and some of the political differences, but they understand sheer cruelty when they see it. And that's objectionable, and they are objecting, and that's obviously something that needs to be built on. We have Phil Restino, who's also been an activist in this project of USS Liberty, and I would welcome him to share some thoughts. And I don't know what's coming up for Phil right now around what he's hearing and what he thinks. What the real question here is, what should we be doing? I mean, we are educating, and Bryce has dedicated his life to speaking to this. And Phil, you can speak to the effort to demand justice from the American Legion, a club of veterans, but even they have resisted being open and honest and transparent. And I think that's part of our struggle here, is getting people to simply be open, honest, and transparent. That seems to be, because if you become open and honest and you are transparent and the truth is revealed, then you have this problem. You have to confront it. You have to talk about it. You have to kind of do something with it rather than stick your head in the sand and ignore it. Thoughts?
Well, there's that saying, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. And I firmly believe in that. I want to thank, first of all, thank TAP and you, Chuck, and Trina, for putting this show on and inviting Bryce Lockwood, old Sarge, as we call him. I believe very strongly in the handbill. I've been on the ground activist since 2004, 2005, when Iraq started up, and I believe that, I don't know the exact quote, but the founding fathers, said, if you want to keep this constitutional republic that we have, it's going to depend on having an informed citizenry, and again, not any one person is going to inform the whole world, but one person can do something. And Trina was good enough to load up links in the chat to some of these documents that any one of us can use. Um, uh, like this one, and it's a great website, If Americans Knew, as well as the If Americans Knew, KNEW.org, who've been very supportive of the cause for the USS Liberty, and the USS Liberty Veterans .org, their own website. And there's others, Honor Liberty Vets, and justiceforliberty.org is another one that has a lot of the interviews of the fellas from one of their conventions, and just chock full of links to short video clips that could be shared and other documentation. So what we our little group in Central Florida does, every June 8th, we have an event. We call it USS Liberty Remembrance Day. And we go out to the county, Volusia County Administrative Center. We set up our tables, our banner, some signs, and we have a petition drive. And the petition link to that is in the chat box. And it's double-sided. I print all this out at home on my own computer and printer. Any one of us can do that. And it has the petition itself, and then on the back side we fold over and mail in. And I do note in the mail-in side, there's two things here, two quotes, and this one quote really gets me, and I think it would grab any veteran. Never before in the history of the United States Navy has a Navy Board of Inquiry ignored the testimony of American military eyewitnesses and taken on faith the word of their attackers. And that's from Dr. Richard Kiefer, Captain, Medical Corps, USS Liberty survivor, Silver Star, Purple Heart. And Bryce could probably tell you more about him. And then on the bottom here, we have a little line, let it not be said that we knew but still did nothing. And then a last piece of information, join the American Legion's Resolution 2017-40 and Veterans of Foreign Wars Resolution 23-423 call on Congress to publicly, impartially, and thoroughly investigate the June 8, 1967 Israeli attack on the USS Liberty and its aftermath. Sign the petition and mail it in today. And even though one of the questions in the chat was, what is a petition going to do? Well, it informs the person who signed it, basically, and one person can tell another, and that person may tell another, and that's I really believe an informed citizenry is the answer. Government's going to do, the representatives in government are going to represent whoever's influencing them the most, and the people, if they're uninformed, there's not much influence. We also had a former president at the time of the LVA, Liberty Veterans Association, Ernie Gallo, lives close by. He lives in Central Florida, East Central Florida, and that's where our group was based out of. And we got a piece written in the Daytona Beach News Journal called "Where Are the Reeves for the Known?" And Representative Ron DeSantis at the time, is Navy JAG officer, and I wrote in here, if anyone should know anything of how a Navy Board of Inquiry works, it would be Congressman DeSantis, and then it's a good piece, and it's something to share with others as a handout, that he went along, not making believe that he didn't know anything about the Liberty. And just when he did get elected governor, the first order of business when he held the first cabinet meeting for the state of Florida, he held it over in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, not in Tallahassee. Trina may back me up on that. So you see where he's influenced, and in order to counter that, the American people and the constituents have to raise a loud enough voice to counter that influence. And if the people don't know, that's not going anywhere. So that's where we come in as everyday people. Is these tools are available. I take the trifold folder flyer from If Americans Knew, which gives the Independent Commission of Inquiry into the attack on the USS Liberty, which was 2003, co-chaired by Admiral Thomas Moore and General Raymond. I can't remember.
Raymond Davis, a Medal of Honor recipient.
Yes, thank you, Bryce. But they found that Israel was guilty of war crimes and murdering American. Basically, it's Israel committed acts of murder against American servicemen and an act of war against the United States. And this is an independent commission. It's not an actual U.S. government investigation, but they're the only ones who did a real investigation. So these are really powerful pieces of information, and that I keep a stack of these on the front seat of my car. And you go into Home Depot or whatever, or Walgreens, CVS, and you see cars that have bumper stickers, and there might be a car, that has veteran on it, Vietnam veteran, Iraq veteran, or Army veteran, whatever. Especially when they say Navy, I'll stick a few of them in my back pocket, and when I see one like that, I'll put it under the windshield wiper. Every little thing that we do is another pencil hole in the dam. And so I want to encourage folks that do know, you might not be able to do everything, but you are able to do something.
Phil,
Very well said. Very well said.
let me just jump in here and just observe that what you are functioning as is essentially a truth action group, and you're advancing the truth around the Liberty. TAP, we're full spectrum. We cover all kinds of stuff. We're not just, we used to be 9/11, Truth Action Project, but now we've expanded into other topics. And I think we start our home page starts with the observation that our government lies to us. And that seems to be, that's the starting point in all of this, is, and maybe, unpack, that's the crises, I think, for a lot of people when you present, hey, did you know that the Navy, covered up an Israeli crime against the United States USS Liberty? What? That's a preposterous thing to say. That's just not possible. However, I think within our culture today, there's an understanding. I think we have opportunity in bringing what I call a political truth movement into politics, and that I think is our task. But no politician can do this alone. They need a community. They need backing. So one of TAP's objectives is to have truth action communities in every city, every state, every local area, so that we meet together and start doing the work. And the work shows up on multiple different fronts. The 9/11 work is very important. I know, Phil, you have some background with the 9/11 truth movement. as well. Is that correct, Phil?
Yes, and since 2005, when was handed one of those DVD documentaries, and I firmly believe anytime that this country is going to send young men and women to go off and kill and be killed in the name of, our country, if there's any question at all regarding the justification for doing that, it should be pursued and not squashed, any question at all. If there's any questioning regarding the reasons the government is giving us to send our men and women off to kill and be killed and spend the trillions of dollars in treasure, blood and treasure, taxpayer money, there should be as much investigation and as much debate as possible. And so the 9/11 truth movement, in my experience, was questioning the official narrative and bringing forth things that have needed to be investigated, and were not. And I and I'm not ashamed of that, and I'm proud of being in that movement. And I still think it was right. I still think there was plenty of things that are deserved investigation, and what was at stake. We ended up killing over 1 million Iraqis, maybe more. Our got 7,000 U.S. troops killed, got tens of thousands wounded. What trillions of dollars? That was a pretty high cost. And
There were no weapons of mass destruction.
No weapons of mass destruction, and the way they pushed this they conflated 9/11 attacks in with it, and one more thing about how the Liberty ties into this. You mentioned accountability earlier when you were speaking with Bryce, and you mentioned the false flag, earlier false flags. If we don't have accountability, it happens again. Gulf of Tonkin, USS Liberty, weapons of mass destruction, if we don't get accountability, they just keep running the same play.
I thank you. So let's I'm trying to think about where we want to go with this. I feel like I'm a convert to the cause of the USS Liberty. To me, it's in my mind, it's been just one of those things. And my fixation as a truth activist has been on the Eisenhower warning. Kennedy heeded the warning and lost his life. It was taken out. And I don't believe the Warren Commission. I think they lied to us about that. And then we were lied to about why we needed to go to Vietnam, and we've been lied to so consistently that I think the public have become inured to it. They've somehow, there's theories of this. There's theories that the public has adopted a Stockholm syndrome, and that they've become a kind of a hostage to a country that tells lies. We had Ed Curtin on our show earlier on year, and he has his book "Living in a Country of Lies," and navigating that. And we are so on the margins. When you look at what the popular media represents and what's represented there. So our work is important, and telling a narrative of big lies and cover-ups. But then the question is, to what end? Where do we go with this? What is it that we want? What do we want in our government? I guess I'll pitch that to you, Bryce, because you're running for office. What do you tell your prospective constituents what do you tell them that you're going to, I mean, how do you navigate this? I mean, how deep do you go when you talk to your community?
Um, let me back up here just a little bit, if you don't mind, Chuck.
Absolutely.
Phil mentioned 2005. In 2005, the USS Liberty Veterans Association filed formal war crimes charges against the government of Israel. A law firm, California, highly respected law firm, Ron Gotcher. Ron Gotcher worked Air Force intelligence during the Vietnam War. Great gentleman. He drew up those war crimes charges free gratis to the USS Liberty. His normal fee would have been deeply into the six-figure bracket. He did it free gratis. We presented those formal war crimes charges in June of 2005. Now, when war crimes charges are presented, it is the obligation of the Secretary of the Army, cabinet post, Secretary of the Army, to investigate charges of war crimes. Nothing was done. 2 years later, two retired admirals, Admiral Merlin Starling, who retired as Judge Advocate General of the United States Navy, and Admiral Mark Hill, also retired two-star admiral, wrote a letter to the Secretary of the Army, and if that had been on my desk, it would have burned clear through to the floor, demanding that he do what's required by U.S. law. Nothing has been done.
What do you think about that?
It's about time we obeyed our own laws, don't you think?
Well, I absolutely agree. And so maybe that's something that if there's going to be political movement, identifying these key constitutional provisions and showing how they've been betrayed. I mean, that's something that people can understand, being lied to and not doing your job.
There was a lady that put a note up here a little earlier, Catherine Waters, I believe was her name. And she said, the American people don't want to know. Well, that's part of the problem. We don't want to do our homework. I remember days when we were required homework dating back to third grade. Before you go to the voting booth, instead of just voting party line or whatever, it'd be a real good idea that you dug into the history of the candidates and find out what they stand for. If they don't stand for the same views that you do, don't vote for them. I see somebody clapping.
Well, Ralph Nader said, if we just voted all the people in Congress out and voted in new people, all of a sudden we'd have the capacity. However, that's an interesting question because there is this thing called continuity of government. Dale Scott. Peter Dale Scott has coined this term, I think. And so even if all the Congress were replaced brand new and they're all kind of innocent, there would still be in government these fixtures, these personnel that and that's a whole nother, maybe we would have a TAP forum on navigating, actually speaking to what does a truth candidate need to appreciate and anticipate and these kinds of things. I mean, there's a lot of things running through my head right now about the predicament our country is in. There's an individual named David Hughes who's written a number of books. I've seen two recent interviews by him, but he's basically arguing that the United States government is essentially a captured entity by the plutocracy, and that there's huge sums of money to be made by conducting war, and there's an interest in having control. And the whole function of the COVID event was to do that to affect, issues of compliance. We're not gonna go into that right now and try to unpack that. I'm just observing that in the truth movement, we are very mindful, I think, of what we're up against, and people have different debates about, what, but we do need to do the work that Phil is describing, but we need to be teaming up. And that's what TAP is here for, is to provide community. But this community that we have right now on Zoom needs to be built out locally in our cities where we are. And I think, what would a political truth movement look like? I mean, maybe that's another TAP forum. Chuck out. Any other thoughts from people? Are there questions in the chat that we should be paying attention to? Trina.
Yeah. Yes, I have one from Eugene Stan. The question is for Bryce. Have you tried to present the story of Liberty to veteran organizations? If you did, what was the reaction?
Generally speaking, everywhere where I've spoken to veterans organizations, VFW, American Legion, posts scattered around, the reception has been overwhelming, humbling in my experience. A week ago Saturday, I was invited by two eminent professors at University of Missouri Columbia to come up and address a group on the attack on our ship. The two gentlemen that invited me, one, a Dr. Saqib Ahmed, contacted me as a result. I mentioned earlier Fadi Banyamarja, the Syrian whose uncle was on the Syrian army in 1967. Dr. Ahmed got my contact from the Banyamarja family. He is a Muslim, eminent gentleman, oncologist. He just received an appointment to MD Anderson Cancer Clinic, 3-year appointment fellowship there. There were over 100 applicants, and his was the only one accepted. The other gentleman was a gentleman by the name of George Smith. George Smith in 2018 was a recipient of the Nobel Prize in chemistry. It was very humbling to me to be a guest at dinner with those two gentlemen. And it was astounding to me the work that they're doing with cancer research. We addressed a group of about 60. There had been a march in downtown Columbia, Missouri, in favor of Gazans and against the war there. A whole bunch of them had been on this long march, hot day, downtown Columbia. The smell wasn't exactly like perfume. There's a little bit of sweat in there. And when I got done speaking, I was overwhelmed.
Wow. So there would be people would welcome the tribunal to know to. So that's promising to me to hear you say that, Bryce, that there's, I think fundamentally people are reasonable, and when presented
with truth,
yeah, I think they can be brought around. And again, that's our struggle here. Other thoughts, Trina? And there are other remarks, and anybody listening in the audience, you can raise your hand. You can make observations about the predicament of living in a world of lies. And I posted the link to David Hughes, this emerging technocracy. I've talked about it in emerging techno-totalitarianism. And the technocracy would run that and does run it. Claudio has his hand up. Let's go to Claudio.
First, I just want to say thank you, Bryce Lockwood, And nice to meet you. I should say, Mister. I'm from Brooklyn. Sometimes we lose our manners, but when we get excited. But uh, we
No,
have
no,
we,
Claudio,
yeah.
no F words, no Brooklynese.
No, I'm doing it. No, I got that in there. No Brooklynese, no Brooklynese. I swear.
Excuse me for interrupting here, Claudio, but my family is originally from upstate New York. My mother's ancestors homesteaded Delaware County. We used
Yeah.
to talk you Brooklynites of being foreigners.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Well, English is our second language. You know. We just get by, you know. And
Yogi Bear would be proud of you.
yeah, well, look, it's like we don't like bad guys, number one. When we get hit that you're a bad guy, we want to just kick your booty, and show who the good guys, that the good we're the representatives for the good guys, and we're the tough guys. And the meaner you are, the worse beating you're gonna get. That's how we grew up. We used to fight gangs and stuff like that, especially in my neighborhood. But anyway, something Phil was saying, and you touched on, Bryce, and I don't know, somebody else, and that I said this is a revolution of awareness. Who coined that? It was Trina was Bolin, Christopher Bolin.
Okay.
This is a revolution of awareness. Me, I have a background in marketing and sales and so on. I know that, the more that people see something, they get naturally curious. It's just by nature. They just got to look into it. Putting something under, in the windshield wiper, that does help. Catherine, I think that's Kat, from Facebook. And but she said, this, Americans are not waking up, but we're looking for the ones that don't. We're looking for the ones that can. And if you don't do something, you're never going to get to those people. I mean, I accidentally came across, the night what happened on 9/11. What really happened, regarding, and it led me to World Trade Center 7. I was in the construction industry. I saw that World Trade Center 7 come down. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It was a perfect controlled demolition. And it wasn't hit, it wasn't hit by a plane. It wasn't. I said, that's the only way you can knock that down is by having, the explosives, timed, just right, and for that for that building to come down the way it did in its own footprint. I said, anyway, so, and then for the other buildings to come down, we've said they were being they're exploding. They were being exploded. We didn't say that the pancake theory and all this other bull crap that they were saying. We saw it live from our vantage point in Brooklyn. And we saw this and we said, oh my God, they're blowing them up. But what I'm saying is that we need to run with the obvious. We don't need to speculate. We don't need to believe. We don't need to think. You just run with what's right in front of us. I mean, the USS Liberty, once you get the facts out there regarding that, you say, holy Jesus Christ, that was a false flag attack. Most people don't know what a false flag attack is. I didn't. Now we have a whole maybe I think 2 web pages dedicated on what false flags are. But false flag attacks are a political reality. Most people don't know that. We should make a T-shirt saying that, by the way. But anyway, I just wanted to hammer home the importance of getting the word out there, and I didn't know about the Palestinian thing. The 9/11, led me to regarding Palestine now, and then eventually I became a goodwill ambassador, for the Palestinian cause on the grassroots level, working with people that they're not there anymore. Working with people in Gaza, a really, professional, collegiate organization down there. Beautiful human beings. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say regarding getting the word out there. I wear a 9/11 T-shirt every single freaking day. Eventually, somebody at the store is going to ask me something, and they do. This is, I always thought something was wrong with that 9/11 thing. And then I'll mention the Palestine thing, because I don't have a T-shirt on Palestine, but I'll mention I said, well, what's going on in Palestine? It has something to do with, what happened on 9/11. And then I start to plant that seed in their head, you know. But I by not wearing the T-shirt, I am invisible. 50% of success is just showing up. That's what marketing is.
Thank you,
That's why you
Claudio.
have, that's why you have, all this money has to get, all these politicians got to get all that money so they can have ads.
Thank you.
So
All right,
just
wrap it up, Claudio, please.
tell you
Go,
both.
we have
No,
another hand up.
Anyway, that's all I want to say. And one more thing, I would like to get hold of Bryce. I would like to have a conversation with you on how I can help you, get the word out regarding you running for office.
Bingo.
That's
Claudio,
it.
do
And
we have
thank you.
permission? Bryce, do we have permission to give your information to Claudio so we can call you on the phone?
Yes.
You can give him my information.
Okay, well, we'll give Claudio, Bryce, we'll give you Claudio's phone number, and if you want to track him down and milk him for all he's worth.
No, I'll help you, buddy. We need the right people in office.
Claudio has talent for sure. Let's go to
Thank you.
Kat.
Hello?
Hi, we hear you.
Hi, thank you so much. Okay, things that I am gonna say, I've had a hard time saying because I wasn't allowed to say it for many, many decades. I mean, I don't know if people that maybe read a couple of things that I put in the chat, but I am pretty versed in the study of the abusive family system for many decades, and child abuse, which over the decades when I learned about the USS Liberty, 9/11, again, everything that I say is 100% true. And I, just like the Liberty, this is why I really care so much about this issue, because I was never allowed to say and talk about abuse for decades. So when I wrote, Americans don't want to know, I know it's not all Americans, but there's a great deal of Americans that from personal experience, what I lived. And again, forgive me for being like brutally honest, but I really was surrounded by very ignorant, uneducated, working class people who were basically all in on the cover up of child abuse, and they kind of did the same like abuses, just on a different scale. And it was all about criminalizing the truth teller, shaming the young vulnerable people for exposing the abusers, and making excuses for the abuser. People have done it since 1970, and this is just a simple fact, and no one ever liked hearing this stuff. For decades, the can got kicked down the road, and this is the world that it gave us by people just making excuses, and this propping up people in authority. And someone mentioned Stockholm syndrome, Charles Ball, I believe it was, which I just want to thank you very much for saying it, because it's you nailed it when you said that. I've been studying. I will not go on. I promise I won't go on for very long, but I've been so passionate about the issue of psychology, of healthy boundaries, of healthy relationship skills, how healthy systems are supposed to function. I've studied this stuff for decades, trying to do things the legitimate way and hoping other people wanted to live in a healthy system. And it literally blows my mind to just end up living in a country and world where you don't like somebody, you just blow them to bits. So it's like, what did I kill myself learning healthy relationship skills for all my life if I knew that we could just abuse people, crush people, blow people up to get what you want? And I feel like a fool for doing everything the legitimate way. It literally got me nowhere. And I've suffered financially. I fought, I resisted, I fought authority all my life. I had to do everything all my life. I'm sorry, by myself. I studied, I resisted. I had no so-called leader to rely on ever. And so when I hear people say, oh, the government would never do that, like it really, the naivety and the adult child pandemic truly that we have in the US is just, it's very serious. And I'll just stop there. Thank you very much for listening.
I can comment there.
Thank you, Kat.
Elizabeth,
Thank you, Kat. Yes, Bryce, go for it.
that's definitely one of the things that we need is a safe place for abused women and their children. It really is something that we desperately need. That's one of the things that I want to work on when I get up to Jefferson City is women's rights. It's about time we paid attention to what has been so-called settled law for the past 50 years and suddenly overturned. The women need a safe place to go where women are abused and their children along with them. We're raising children that have a real problem. By having a safe place for their mother to go, a safe place for those children to go, we can have a generation coming up of folks that are accepted into our system. The old rule, back when I was a kid in third grade, we're each given a wooden ruler, courtesy of the Coca-Cola bottling company. And on the front of it, it said, a good rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
So true.
And
So true.
I think we could build a movement on that.
Yeah, I wanted to say to Kat, you have your integrity. So you didn't come away with nothing. You still have your integrity. And I
Amen.
thank you very much, sister. So I wanted to say too, a comment Chuck you had made or Kat made about kicking the can down the road. I was going to read this comment earlier and then the moment escaped. Irving Lee said the murder of JFK was done in compliance with LBJ. LBJ wanted to assist Israel's nuclear weapons development, which JFK tried to stop. JFK wanted to end nuclear proliferation and end the Cold War. The best resource is Michael Collins Piper's book, Final Judgment. So I wanted to thank him for that comment and just acknowledge the fact that we have been letting too many things just slide in this country. And it's great that all the work Phil's doing, Kat's doing, Claudio's doing, we're all doing to awaken our citizenry. But if the citizenry isn't willing to take action, we're still in a conundrum. So I just want to encourage more people to find their courage and find their integrity and to realize that we are in dire straits and we do need more people to step up and take action and run for office and, try to change the system the best we can. Over. Thank you. Thank you for my share.
Part of the problem that we have as a society today, in my opinion, is the fact that 4 years ago we had a bully in the White House. And people who had bully tendencies began to think, well, it's just all right.
I hear you. Other thoughts from anyone? I just want to pick up on Claudio's chat statement that TAP should have a page. We worked hard on the website, and Trina and Claudio were the chief leads on it, and it's kind of a encyclopedic but certainly a dedicated page to the USS Liberty. But when we represent it, and we'll highlight links to Alison Weir's work and other work, but I think the emphasis will be on the covering up, on the big lies that are being told, and the cruelty of the event. I mean, much of what we're reacting against as truthers are fundamentally cruel events by real human beings, people that are so filled with hubris and righteous arrogance.
Ego.
And we could say ego, and some might even say downright evil, but this is what we're up against and struggling for. But we're gonna take this to a next level at the website with a dedicated page. That's coming. We'll send it out on our newsletter when it's done. Claudio has his hand up.
Well, yeah, you know, I raised my hand, and I hope, and I'm asked right away. Otherwise, I'll forget. Because you guys already know I have I have issues. I've got too many tabs open in my head, and you know, simultaneously. So they tend to clash with each other. Anyway, but everything, it's like there's the reality that the average person does not know about. The people that are in power are psychopaths. The people are, you know, people like you and me, you know, your kids, you know, my mom, etc. In some other country, they're being slaughtered, they're being bombed, they're being used, you know, for whatever, you know, you can use another human being, you know, on exploitation on every single level imaginable. But these are the people in power that are doing it. It's like when I hear, you know, the Russians are, you know, the Russians are invading Ukraine. Do I think of the Russians? I think of the excuse me if I use some Brooklyn, I swear. I don't like bad guys. See what bad
No
guys
Brooklynese.
Yeah, that's what bad guys do. They make you chaotic. They get you, you know, they make you awkward. They make you look stupid. But that's why they need their asses kicked. Don't you agree? It's about time, you know, we got to kick their booty, but you got to get as smart as they do. There's only a handful of people in power that are actually doing this stuff. The Russian people are not doing this stuff. The Palestinian people are not doing this stuff. You know, the Israeli people, well, they've been brainwashed, you know, just like most Americans, you know, about how great, you know, the Israeli government is, and everything they do is fantastic. And so, but these it's a handful of the people at the top. They are crazy. These guys, you know, they will do whatever it takes for greed and power. They will divide us like crazy. They'll create all the wedge issues so we can, you know, we're busy fighting each other within the populace. So to keep our eyes off them, we need to get hip to that stuff. So I was going to use some Brooklynese again. Anyway,
Thank you.
this is why-
Claudio, let Chuck close us out
no,
because
no,
he needs
yeah,
to.
that was it. My minute was up. And
Okay.
thank you, thank you for the time, you guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm gonna spotlight myself here, and we're gonna end the recording, and Trina is going to
Say
shepherd.
good night, thank our guests, and close us out by the, you know, who we are.
and
Thank
then
you for
people
coming. And then we'll end the recording.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for coming. I'm Chuck Fall. This is a TAP forum event. Our guest is Bryce Lockwood. We unpacked the cover up in the false flag event of the USS Liberty, and there needs to be more discussion about this. But we're going to end our recording.
Thank you, Phil.
Now.
Thank you, Phil, very much.
And thank you, Trina, for highlighting Phil and your participation. So I am going
stop
to
the recording, and then I'll stop the live stream. And we'll
there we go.
continue on with the chat here behind the scenes, but we will formally end the recording and the live stream. Just a moment. Okay.